My name is Claire Tolliver. I am 34 years old and I am a captain in the United States Army. On a Friday afternoon in April, my husband sent me a text message that looked like an invitation. Be home on time tonight. Mom's got a surprise waiting. So I signed out early from my logistics office at Fort Merrick, buckled my 1-year-old daughter Ava into her car seat, and drove 70 miles back to our house in Marwood, Ohio, because I genuinely believed my family was preparing to celebrate something. Instead, I walked into my own living room and found 30 of my husband's relatives standing in eerie, rehearsed silence. Nobody smiled. Nobody looked at my daughter. My husband, Ryan, slammed a sheet of paper onto the coffee table and announced to the entire room that the child on my hip was not biologically his. My mother-in-law screamed at me to get out of her house. And before I could even defend myself or ask a single question, the front door behind me swung open without warning. That sheet of paper Ryan had slammed down was the opening salvo in a war my husband had been preparing for months. What he didn't prepare for, however, was what I do for a living. I move proof for the United States Army, pallets, manifests, receipts, entire convoys of documentation. Over the next 4 months, I built a paper trail so airtight it ended in a courtroom with those same 30 relatives watching their story collapse under the weight of forensic evidence, metadata, delivery tracking numbers, and one very patient document examiner. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family drama and revenge stories unfold slowly, deliberately, and all the way to the final signature. If a story like this has ever knocked on your door, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe, because you're going to want to see how the paperwork won. Let me take you back to that doorway. Our street in Marwood was packed solid that evening, bumper to bumper with cars I recognized from church cookouts and family reunions. I remember thinking my mother-in-law Sandra had really gone overboard with whatever surprise she'd orchestrated. I carried Ava in on my hip, her diaper bag slung over one shoulder, and a lemon cake from the bakery near the base balanced in my free hand. The front door was unlocked, which wasn't unusual. The living room was full, which was 30 people, and I could name every single one of them. Aunts, cousins, Ryan's uncle Gene who cries at parades and fireworks, the neighbors from 2 doors down who'd helped us move furniture in. Not one of them said hello. The room had that scraped-clean silence you get in an aircraft hangar after the engines shut off, the kind that hums in your chest. Ryan stood in the middle of it like a man delivering closing arguments. My mother-in-law Sandra stood at his shoulder with her church face on, the one she wears for benedictions and difficult conversations. I said, "What's going on?" Ryan picked a folder off the mantel, pulled out a single sheet of paper and slammed it down on the coffee table hard enough to rattle the coasters. "DNA results," he said, his voice loud and theatrical. "This child isn't mine." The words didn't land right away. I actually laughed, one short, confused breath of a laugh, because it was the most absurd sentence I'd ever heard in that house. Nobody laughed with me. Sandra's voice came in high and shaking, the way it does when she's been rehearsing lines. "You wore that uniform and you shamed this family. Get out of my house." She pointed at the door behind me with her whole arm extended, like she was directing traffic at a funeral. 30 faces turned toward me in one synchronized motion. Ava grabbed the collar of my uniform jacket, and behind my back I heard the doorknob turn. The door opened, and Staff Sergeant Maya Reyes stepped into that living room in her civilian jeans and her duty day posture, holding a manila folder against her chest like it was classified intel. She looked at the crowd. The crowd looked at her. "Am I early?" she said in a voice that could halt a convoy at full speed. She was not early. She was exactly on time, because 2 weeks before that night, I had asked her to meet me at the Marwood house at 7:30. Why I asked her is its own story, and I'll get to it. It had to do with a bank account and a number that didn't add up. What matters is what one witness does to a room like that. 30 people can convince each other of anything. 30 people plus one outsider suddenly remember what they actually know, which in this case was absolutely nothing. Jean stopped nodding. 2 cousins found something fascinating on the carpet. I set the lemon cake on the entry table, walked to the coffee table, and picked up Ryan's sheet of paper while he watched me the way a salesman watches you read a contract he's already sure you'll sign. Lab name I'd never heard of. A percentage in bold. And near the bottom, one small detail that made me steadier eye. Instead of weaker, I didn't say what it was out loud. I folded the page once, set it back down, and looked at my husband. "Ava and I will be at my quarters on base," I said. You can talk to my lawyer. Then I picked up my daughter's bag, nodded to Maya, and walked out through the door she was still holding open. Behind me, Sandra was still shouting about her house. That was the last time I ever walked out of that door believing it might blow over. You should know who they picked this fight with. My father was a supply sergeant, 22 years in uniform, a man who could find you a fan belt in a sandstorm or a part number in a filing cabinet at 3 in the morning. When I was 16, somebody in his unit cooked the books and let the blame drift toward him. My father refused to fight it in the open. He took a quiet discharge, moved us home to Ohio, and spent his last 11 years being half-believed at the hardware store where he worked the counter. He had one sermon delivered over the tailgate of his truck on Saturday mornings when he'd let me help him sort inventory. People lie, he'd say. Paper doesn't blink. He kept receipts for everything, boxes of them, labeled by month, stacked in the attic, and showed them to no one. I loved him, and I swore I would never die the way he was dying, misread by a town too lazy to check the numbers. Then I went and built his exact life, just with better posture. ROTC scholarship at 18. Commissioned at 22. 12 years of moving freight and proof for the United States Army. I met Ryan Tolliver at a wedding when I was 27. Third-generation realtor, the kind of charm that makes a room lean toward him without realizing it's happening. We married when I was 29. At 31, I bought the house in Marwood. My VA loan, my $31,000 down payment, saved one deployment at a time. Both names went on the deed because that's what marriage is supposed to mean. Ava came when I was 33. Our arrangement was simple. Weekdays she stayed with me in family housing at Fort Merrick, 10 minutes from the base childcare center. Weekends we drove to Marwood and played house with the tile and the yard and her grandmother's voice. I thought the commute was the hard part of my marriage. The hard part was living with a man who was taking inventory of everything I had. That night in my quarters with Ava asleep against a rolled towel, I opened my laptop and did what I'd been doing for 2 weeks. I watched the numbers. Here's the part I promised you. 14 days before the ambush, my banking app had locked me out. I called the bank the same hour. A polite young man told me the recovery email on our joint accounts had been changed, not by me. I changed every password I owned that night, turned on transaction alerts, and rerouted my paycheck into an account with only my name on it. I also asked Maya to come with me to Marwood on the 19th, because I intended to ask my husband one calm question about money, and I wanted a witness with a good memory. That was the meeting Ryan scheduled his little surprise on top of. Now with printouts spread across my kitchen table, I could finally see the whole shape of it. Our joint savings had held a shade over $50,000 in October. It held $1,900 now, 11 transfers over 5 months. $48,200 in all, every one of them to the same place, Tolliver Realty operating account. He hadn't stolen it in the legal sense. His name was on that account, same as mine. And when I had asked the bank about closing joint savings, the answer was simple. Both signatures required. Both. I could reroute my paycheck, and I did. I could not lock a door we both held keys to, so I sat there at midnight doing sergeant's daughter math, and one date stopped me cold. The transfer started in November. The DNA test showed up in April. He wasn't a betrayed husband who found proof. He was a man in a financial hole, building a story to climb out on my back. Monday morning, my battalion commander called me into his office before I'd finished my first coffee. Lieutenant Colonel Park is a fair man with a face like a filing cabinet, and he slid a printout across the desk without a word. An email sent Friday night at 11:02 p.m. from an address made of random letters. Subject line: Conduct of CPT Tolliver. Attached was a scan of Ryan's so-called DNA test, plus 3 paragraphs accusing me of adultery, written by someone who typed the word honor 4 separate times. Here's what civilians don't always know. In the Army, adultery isn't just a sad story. Under the rules we live by, it can be a punishable offense. An accusation like that, in writing, with an exhibit stapled to it, isn't something a commander can shrug at. He has to look into it. Colonel Park was decent about it. He said the timing smelled like a divorce tactic, and he also said the word I knew was coming. Ink. Uteri, which meant a flag on my file, which meant my packet for Major, the one going before the promotion board that fall, would sit in a drawer while strangers asked my coworkers about my marriage. I walked out of that office and stood in the parking lot for a minute, watching the flag snap on its pole. My husband hadn't just aimed at my house. Before that Friday was even over, somebody had been at a keyboard aiming at my career. A divorce takes half. This was designed to take all of it. The house, my daughter, my rank, my name. I got in my truck and made 2 calls. The second one was to a general. Major General Raymond Hayes commands the division, and 11 years ago he commanded me in Kuwait back when he was a lieutenant colonel with a habit of reading every line of every manifest. I once watched him refuse a pallet of steaks a contractor gifted the battalion, on principle, in July in 110-degree heat. That's the man I asked for 10 minutes. He gave me 12. He listened with his hands flat on the desk, and when I finished, he didn't offer me sympathy because sympathy is not what he stocks. "Here's what I can do, Captain," he said. "Nothing, I can't put my thumb on the scale for you. What I can do is make sure nobody else puts theirs on it either. The inquiry runs by the book. No shortcuts, no whisper campaign, no career funeral before the facts are in. You bring receipts, that's your lane. It's always been your lane." Then he picked up the phone and got me 30 minutes with Major Dan Whitfield, a JAG attorney with a runner's build and a surgeon's patience. Whitfield looked at the scan of Ryan's test for about a minute and a half and almost smiled. "This is a home kit result at best," he said. "No verified identities, no chain of custody. No court in this state will treat it as proof of anything." He couldn't represent me in a civilian divorce. The Army doesn't work that way, but he could translate the battlefield. Get a civilian family lawyer today. Answer the petition. And ask the court to order a real test, the legal kind where everyone shows ID and a stranger seals the tubes. Make the paper fight fair, Whitfield said, and paper will win. I wrote that down. The petition arrived that Thursday, hand-delivered to the base gate like a dare. Ryan was filing for divorce, him, the wounded party in his own screenplay. He wanted exclusive use of the Marwood house. He wanted temporary custody of Ava. And his lawyer had typed the reasons in a neat little stack. The mother resides in military quarters. The mother is subject to field rotations and deployment on short notice. The mother's schedule is incompatible with a stable home. My schedule, the one that had Ava at the base childcare center by 7:40 every morning, fed, dressed, and singing. Behind the petition came a second envelope, the one his lawyer probably called generous. If I signed over my interest in the house and waived any claim to the business accounts, Ryan would agree to keep the paternity matter private, out of the church, out of the neighborhood, and away from my chain of command. I read it twice to make sure it said what it said. Grace Kettler, the family lawyer I'd hired on Whitfield's advice, read it once. She's 52, wears reading glasses on a chain, and has the bedside manner of a woodchipper. "This isn't a divorce," she said. "This is a foreclosure with your wedding photos in it. He manufactured a scandal and now he's selling you the silence." She slid the envelope back across the table. "We're not buying, we're going to court." I want to pause here just for a breath. If anyone has ever handed you something quiet to sign to keep the peace, tell me in the comments what you did. I read every one. And subscribe, because the next thing his family slammed down wasn't a folder, it was a court order. Kettler spread Ryan's test on her conference table like a coroner starting a shift. "Walk me through what's wrong with this," she said, and then answered herself, tapping the page with her pen. "No collection site, no signature from any technician, no case number format I've ever seen from an accredited lab, nothing showing who swabbed whom, or when, or who watched. Real paternity evidence has a chain of custody," she said. "A neutral third party checks ID, takes the samples, seals them, ships them, and signs every handoff. This thing," she flicked the corner, "this is a horoscope with a percentage on it." The lab name printed across the top was GenServe Diagnostics. That afternoon, I called the customer service number on the letterhead. Twice. The first time, it rang into a robotic voicemail that repeated the number back to me and hung up. The second time, same robot, same dead end. No hold music, no menu, no human. No lab I've ever dealt with runs its phones like that, and the Army has made me deal with many. Kettler filed our response to the petition the next morning, and with it, the motion that became the spine of everything that followed, a request that the court order genetic testing, the legal kind. Both parties, photo ID, witnessed collection, accredited laboratory. He built his whole case on one piece of paper, Kettler said, sliding the motion into her briefcase. "So we're going to ask the court to make the paper real. Watch what he does when we do. Innocent men welcome a better test." She was right about that, and I'll tell you exactly how his lawyer reacted when we get there. But first, the court took something from me. The temporary orders hearing lasted 40 minutes, which is a short amount of time to lose your weekdays with your daughter. Ryan's lawyer was a smooth man named Prather who used the phrase, the marital home in Marwood, the way realtors say charming. He painted the picture with a soft brush. The father, self-employed, works from the family residence. The grandmother, 4 blocks away, devoted. The mother, a respectful pause, resides in military quarters 70 miles from the child's community, subject to field exercises and deployment without notice. He mentioned my upcoming 9-day training rotation 3 times. He never once said I was a bad mother, which is the cleverest way to say it. Kettler pushed back with the childcare records, the pediatrician at the base clinic, the simple fact that Ava had spent every weekday of her life with me. But temporary hearings run on shorthand, and the shorthand of that courtroom was a house with a yard versus a woman with orders. The judge kept the child's weekday routine in the marital home. Ava with Ryan Monday through Friday, with me on weekends. Video calls in between. Status quo, he called it. It was nobody's status quo. It was brand new, and it handed my daughter's Tuesdays to the man who'd staged a tribunal in her living room. Kettler caught my arm in the hallway. This is the round military mothers lose, she said. I've watched it for 20 years. Deployment gets dressed up as instability and the ink dries before the truth shows up. The final hearing is the fight. Don't spend yourself here. I nodded, professional as a fence post. Then I sat in my truck in the parking garage, looked at the empty car seat in the mirror, and let myself have exactly 5 minutes. The family went quiet around me, the way a town goes quiet before a tornado, all at once on some signal I never heard. Bate, Ryan's sister, the one who taught Ava to clap, sent me a text that read, "Please just sign whatever he sent. Don't drag the family through this, I'm begging you." Cousins unfriended me in a neat little row. The pastor's wife, who'd hugged me at Ava's baptism, looked through me at the grocery store like I was a window with a bad view. Somebody, and I never found out who, told the base spouses group that Claire Tolliver had stepped out on her husband, and that sentence crossed 70 miles faster than I ever drove them. My thumbs actually typed the long message. You know the one with the dates, the bank alerts, the explanation, the proof, the 3 paragraphs of my father's daughter begging a jury that had already voted. I sat on my bed in quarters at 1 a.m. and read it over. And then I deleted the whole thing, because explaining yourself to people who helped build the stage is just applause from the wrong side. Maya watched me do it over pizza the next night and shook her head slow. You keep proving you can bleed quietly, she said. One of these days, try winning loudly, just once, as a treat. I told her the court would do my talking. I half believed it. Then Wednesday, an envelope with no return address showed up at my quarters. Inside was a blank card, cream-colored, heavy stock. No message at all. Just a name signed in a slanted, old-fashioned hand at the bottom. Ruth, Ryan's grandmother. The only Tolliver who hadn't been standing in that living room. While the family voted, I did logistics. The subpoenaed bank records landed on Kettler's desk in a box, and I spent a weekend turning that box into a binder with color-coded tabs, because that is my love language. Red tabs, 11 transfers, November through March, joint savings to Tolliver Realty operating, totaling $48,200. Blue tabs, the childcare ledger from the base center, every weekday sign-in since Ava was 8 weeks old. My initials in the box, morning and evening. Hundreds of them. It's hard to call a woman an absent mother when her handwriting shows up twice a day for a year. And then the green tab, the one that made Kettler put her glasses up in her hair. In February, someone had applied online for a home equity line of credit against the Marwood house. $60,000, with my electronic signature on the application. I never signed it. The application had been submitted at 2:14 on a Tuesday afternoon from an IP address that resolved to the offices of Tolliver Realty. It died quietly in underwriting for one reason. The fraud alerts I'd set up made the bank call Why sell to verify, and I told them the truth. No, that was not me, freeze it. At the time, I'd assumed identity thieves. Now I knew the thief's middle name. Kettler looked at the green tab for a long minute. He needed money badly enough to forge your name in February, she said. Remember that when you're tempted to think any of this was about love or doubt or that little girl. This was a man drowning, looking around for something buoyant to stand on. That would be me. Ava spiked a fever on one of my weekends, tugging her left ear and crying that ragged cry that rewires a mother's spine. I took her to the urgent care in Marwood, And when the nurse called us back, Sandra was sitting in the waiting room with her purse on her knees. Ryan had texted her, apparently. She followed us in, and I let her because Ava reached for her. And whatever else is true in this story, that part was real. Sandra sang the counting song while the doctor checked Ava's ears. She knew the verse Ava likes, the one with the ducks. She caught the little shoe when it dropped and warmed it in her hands before she put it back on. Ear infection, amoxicillin, nothing scary. In the parking lot, Sandra stood beside my truck while I buckled the car seat, and for one strange minute she talked to me like a woman instead of a verdict. "You think I'm cruel," she said. "I was 29 once in the same town with people saying things about my husband. A woman is what this town says she is. I learned that the hard way and I made my peace with it. You'll learn it too." There was no meanness in her voice. That was the frightening part. She wasn't spitting at me. She was reciting the town's catechism, the one she'd paid her whole life to memorize, the one where the family's story is a house and every woman in it is load-bearing. For a second I felt something for her that was almost tenderness. Then she straightened her coat and finished the lesson. "Ryan would never lie about blood," she said, and walked to her car. And I understood. The sermon had never been for me. The first week of May, the court granted our motion, and Ryan's side lost its manners. Prather objected in writing and in person. Testing was redundant, invasive, an insult to a grieving father. Grieving, he actually said, grieving about a man whose child was alive and teething. Kettler answered with one sentence I plan to have engraved somewhere. "If Mr. Tolliver trusts his results, Your Honor, a better lab can only agree with him." The judge signed the order. Legal paternity testing. Both parties and the child. Government-issued photo ID. Samples collected under observation at a certified facility. Chain of custody documented from swab to lab bench. A week later, the appointment card came in the mail, plain as a jury summons. Collection, May 9, 9:00 a.m. Both parties. Photo ID required. I stuck it to the refrigerator in my quarters with a magnet shaped like a tomato dead center, where I would see it every single morning while Ava's oatmeal spun in the microwave. My father's voice came up out of some tailgate in 1998, "People lie. Paper doesn't blink." Next to the card, I'd taped a photocopy of the deed to the Marwood house. And some nights, passing between the stove and the sink, I'd stop and look at the line where the owners are named. "Get out of my house," she'd screamed. Her asterisk house. My asterisk name. Both of those things were on file somewhere, and only one of them was true. Here's the question I want you to hold on to, because I held it for 2 weeks straight. If Ryan honestly believed that test of his, if the science was really on his side, why did his lawyer fight this hard to keep a better lab away from it? The commander's inquiry moved through my unit that same month, polite and heavy, like a piano being walked upstairs. My supply officer got interviewed. My motor sergeant got interviewed. People I'd trained, people whose weddings I'd stood up in, sat across from an investigating officer and answered questions about my marriage, and then avoided my eyes at the fuel point, not from doubt, from embarrassment, which somehow lands harder. My promotion packet was flagged, formally frozen, pending resolution. The battalion command list. I'd been quietly shortlisted, went from a conversation to a silence. And then Ryan's team filed a fresh exhibit in the divorce case, a sworn declaration from Sandra Tolliver, stating that at Thanksgiving, in her kitchen, I had confessed to an affair with a man from the base. I read it standing up. Thanksgiving, in her kitchen. I had been nursing a 5-month-old and basting a turkey while Sandra told me which pan I was ruining. The declaration didn't even sound like her. It sounded like a lawyer's idea of her. The phrase, "the man in question," appeared twice. Sandra has never in her life said "the man in question." She talks like a church bulletin, not a deposition. Whitfield went over it with me line by line and set it down. Gently, "Perjury by dictation," he said. "It reads drafted. These usually crack when the witness has to say it out loud in a room under oath. Until then, discipline. The flag comes off when the truth goes in." I kept his words and Kettler's warning in the same pocket. They didn't need to beat me in court. Not really. They needed me tired, broke, ashamed, and gone before the truth finished lacing its boots. Knowing that was its own kind of armor. Discovery is a beautiful word. It means the other side has to hand you things they'd rather burn. Kettler demanded the original digital file of the GenServe report, not a scan, the actual PDF, with its guts intact, and sent it to a forensic document examiner named Howard Feld, a quiet man who has spent 30 years making paper testify. While we waited on Feld, I did my own kind of homework. the kind they issue you with a supply clipboard. At the ambush, Ryan had waved around more than the report. He'd shown his uncles the asterisk box asterisk, the swab kit he claimed he'd used on Ava in secret, like a man producing the murder weapon. Kettler's discovery demand covered that kit too, the physical box, produced for inspection, label and all. A cardboard box has a shipping label. A shipping label has a tracking number. Kettler subpoenaed the carrier's records for it, and one Tuesday morning in early May, the answer came back on a single page. The kit was delivered to the Marwood front porch on April 14th at 2:47 in the afternoon. I got out the so-called report and set the 2 pages side by side on my kitchen table and looked at what time itself had to say about my husband. The report results percentage letterhead the works was dated April 5th. The test existed before the test kit did. 9 days before, you can fake a letterhead. You can fake a signature and a phone number and a lab that answers in a robot's voice. But a delivery scan sits in a carrier's database, time-stamped by machines that have no idea who's married to whom. Paper can be printed. History can't. I slept 8 hours that night for the first time in a month. May 9th came in bright and ordinary. The collection office was a beige suite next to a dentist, and it ran on the sacred boredom of procedure, which by then I loved the way other people love cathedrals. A technician named Denise checked my ID against her list, checked Ava's birth certificate, photographed us, and gloved up. Ryan arrived 11 minutes late with sunglasses on his head, working the room out of habit. "Y'all make a guy feel famous," he told Denise, flashing the listing to her grin. Denise did not look up. "Photo ID please," she said, and something in me sang one quiet note. She swabbed Ava's cheek while my daughter sat on my lap, chewing the ear of a rubber giraffe. She swabbed mine. She swabbed Ryan's. Each swab went into its own sleeve, sealed with evidence tape, initialed, logged, donor, time, witness, while both of us watched. Chain of custody isn't a phrase, it's a little ceremony. And every step of it says the same sentence: nobody gets to be alone with the truth. That was the sentence Ryan's entire life was allergic to. On his way out, he passed close to my chair, bent down as if to say goodbye to Ava, and put his voice just under the hum of the air conditioner. "Doesn't matter what the tube says, Claire, everyone already believes me." Then he thanked Denise loudly and left, trailing cologne. I sat still and let it settle because he wasn't wrong. Belief is loud, and his family's belief had 30 voices and a church pew. But while we waited on that sealed tube, Kettler's phone rang about a PDF. "If you've stayed with me this long, subscribe and stick around, because the paper trail was about to catch fire." Then the Army did what the Army does. It sent me to the field for 9 days. Rain, radios, and 400 soldiers worth of chow and fuel to move. Exactly as Ryan's lawyer had predicted, with such sorrow. Ava stayed in Marwood under the temporary order. I got a video call window most evenings, 7 minutes of a pixelated baby smearing yogurt while Sandra's voice offered commentary from off-screen, and then a dropped signal and a long walk back through the mud. I'm not going to dress it up. Those 9 days were the worst of the whole war. Worse than the living room because the living room only took my dignity. On night 6, in a tent that smelled like diesel and wet canvas, Maya and I split a care package brownie and I told her the whole story of my father. The cooked books, the quiet discharge, the hardware store. I'd never told anyone all of it, not even Ryan, especially not Ryan. "He kept every receipt that proved him innocent," I said. "Boxes of them. We found them in the attic after the funeral, labeled by month. He could have cleared his name in a week." Maya was quiet for a while. "So why didn't he?" she asked. And I heard myself say the true thing out loud for the first time. Because he was proud. He decided that. If the town needed proof, the town didn't deserve him. And it killed him, not the lie, the silence. Maya passed me the last of the brownie. "And you," she said. I looked at the tent ceiling for a long time. When we rolled back through the gate on day 9, 2 envelopes were waiting in my quarters. The lab and Feld. I opened the lab's envelope standing up, still in a dirty uniform with field mud on my boots and Ava's giraffe on the counter. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Ryan Tolliver was Ava's father, said the accredited laboratory, the witness swabs, the sealed tubes, the unbroken chain of signatures. I sat down on the kitchen floor of my quarters and cried for about 90 seconds, the ugly kind. And then I washed my face, because I know the difference between a battle and a war. I was right, too. Here's what that number changed in Marwood: nothing. Kettler formally served the results on Ryan's counsel that week, and Ryan, I have to give the devil his due, had already moved. 2 days before the results landed, he'd called a family meeting at Sandra's, wept at her kitchen table, and unveiled the new script. He was a victim too. That testing website had defrauded him. He'd swabbed his own daughter in good faith, paid his money, and been handed a lie that broke his heart. And now the lawyers say the real test proves Ava is his, and thank God, thank God. He cried, Bate told me later. Actual tears on cue, the man should have done theater. And the chorus took it up in one breath. Poor Ryan, deceived by the internet, and notice how he never stopped loving that little girl. Sandra called Ava our miracle on the church steps. Nobody called me, nobody apologized. The same 30 people who'd watched me get pointed out of my own front door simply revised the story and kept their seats. Everyone already believes me, he'd said. Belief just needed a new coat of paint. But the second envelope was still sitting on my counter. Feld's report was 41 pages, and it didn't paint. Howard Feld had taken Ryan's PDF apart the way you'd strip a rifle and laid the pieces out in order. Piece 1 *, the GenServe report was built from a template, a novelty paternity certificate sold online by a company whose own website says, in small gray letters, for entertainment purposes only. Same fonts. Same seal, same layout grid. Feld overlaid them and they matched like a fingerprint. Piece 2 * the file's metadata. The PDF's author field read, RTOLLIVER, created and last saved on March 30th at 11:38 at night. Piece 3 * the money. The template cost $39.99. Purchased March 30th with a Tolliver Realty debit card. Receipt to Ryan's own email. Subpoenas are wonderful things. Piece 4 * that robotic phone line for GenServe customer service. An internet phone number, registered March 28th. Paid for with the same debit card. He hadn't just faked a document. He'd built a little theater set around it, box office and all. And Piece 5, my favorite, stapled to a subpoena return. The anonymous email to my commander had been sent through an account created that same week, from the same block of internet addresses as the realty office. Every road on Feld's map drove back to the same desk. So there it was in exhibit form, not a husband deceived by a shady website, an asterisk author. A man who typed his daughter out of his own blood on March 30th, ordered a prop kit on April 9th to wave at his uncles, and scheduled a firing squad for April 19th. Dated ambush. Dated lie. Dated and paid for weeks before he ever learned anything. Kettler read all 41 pages twice, took her glasses off, and asked me the question the whole story had been marching toward. We can end his freedom, Claire, or end this war. Pick. I didn't pick that day. I picked the next morning at 6 a.m. over black coffee, the hour I trust my own head. Step 1 wasn't the district attorney. Step 1 was the court that had been lied to. Kettler drafted a motion for sanctions, fraud on the court, and attached everything, Feld's 41 pages, the template overlay, the metadata, the debit card, the tracking sheet showing the kit arriving 9 days after its own results. Filing it meant standing up in public records and calling my husband a forger in ink under my own name. There would be no walking that back. No version where we quietly reconciled at Thanksgiving. No future where the Tolliver family and I ever again pretended at peace. Kettler made sure I understood. If any piece of it wobbles, you'll be the vindictive army wife who cried forgery, and the town will have its ending. I read every page one more time, checked the exhibits against my own binder like I was inventorying a convoy, and signed. My hand didn't shake. And I want you to know, I checked. People lie, paper doesn't blink. And now my paper outweighed his by 41 pages and 1 delivery scan. That night I did one more piece of filing, private docket, J. Udge of 1. I took off my wedding ring, wrapped it in the receipt copy of the sanctions motion, and sealed both in an envelope. And wrote the date on the outside like evidence, because that's what it was. Evidence that I'd loved him, that it had been real on my side, and that it was closed. I put the envelope in the fireproof box next to my father's discharge papers. 2 quiet soldiers in 1 small tin. Then I slept, and I did not dream about the living room. A sanctions motion is a public document, and Marwood reads its public documents the way other towns read box scores. Within a week, the story forked. Half the town held the line. Poor Ryan, that woman again. but the other half had now read words like asterisk metadata asterisk and asterisk novelty certificate and entertainment purposes only, and you could feel the pews shifting weight. Two sellers pulled their listings from Tolliver Realty. Then a third. The quiet kind of verdict, a business town hands down. I didn't gloat, I'd love to tell you I'm above it. The truth is I was too busy. And also, my mother raised me to gloat privately, into a dish towel. Thursday night, Bate called. She was crying before I said hello. The Thanksgiving thing, she said. Mom's declaration. Claire, I was standing in the kitchen the whole time you were there. You talked about turkey and the baby's ears, that's all. She'd seen the declaration language too, heard Prather's paralegal walk Sandra through it. Just sign it. It's a formality. It keeps the family safe. Formality. A sworn statement, drafted by strangers, laid in front of a grieving, furious mother like a hymnal, open to the right page. I asked Bate the only question that mattered. Will you put what you just told me in an affidavit? The line went so quiet I could hear her kitchen clock. He's my brother, she whispered, and she's my mother. I told her I understood. And I did. I'd watched a family vote before from the losing side of a hardware store. I didn't push. I've read the ending, so I'll just tell you. Remember Bate. That Sunday, my phone rang from a number I didn't know, and a voice like dry paper said, "This is Ruth Tolliver. Come Tuesday. I make the tea at 3. Ruth Tolliver lived at the edge of town in the first house the family ever owned, small and square, with black and white photographs marching up the staircase wall. She was 84 and poured tea like a woman who'd outlived every argument in the county. I'll spare you my speech, because she cut it off a sentence in. I know what my grandson is, she said. I've known since he sold his own bicycle twice in one summer. Sit down. So I sat, and Ruth gave me the only inheritance she had to hand out that day, which was history. Long before I came along, there had been trouble in the family. Money trouble. Her son's doing, back when Sandra was a young wife, new to the name. The details had sanded down over the years, the way Ruth told it, but the shape was clear. The family had needed someone to carry the shame quietly, so the name could keep selling houses. And everyone had looked at Sandra. And Sandra had signed what she was asked to sign, and swallowed what she was asked to swallow. She lost her election, Ruth said, stirring her tea. And she lived, and she made a religion out of it. This family's been voting on the truth since before you were born, child. Somebody has to lose an election and live. I asked if she'd say any of it in court. No, she said, plain as weather. I'm too old to change teams in public, but I wanted you looking at the right target. It was never you they were voting against. It's what you didn't need from them. I drove back to base with that in my chest. My phone buzzed at a red light. Kettler, they blinked. Settlement conference Friday. His side requested it. Thursday evening, the night before the conference, I stopped at the mediation building downtown to drop exhibit copies with Kettler's office, and Ryan was waiting by the elevators like a coincidence, in a good jacket. He'd lost a little weight. His voice came out in the register he used to use on Sunday mornings, coffee, the one I married. Claire, 5 minutes. No lawyers. I should have kept walking. I gave him the 5 minutes because I wanted to see the salesman work one more time. He offered me everything. The house, it was always more yours, we both know that. The savings, repaid with interest. Ava, whatever schedule you want, I won't fight you. All I had to do was withdraw the sanctions motion and let Feld's report disappear into a sealed settlement. One signature, and everyone gets to heal. He said heal twice. And when I didn't answer, the register changed, and the real Ryan surfaced like a fin. You should think about what winning even gets you, he said, gentle as a knife in a towel. Even if you take all of it, you'll still be the woman 30 people watched get thrown out of her own house. That's the version they'll tell at every table. In this town forever. That never washes off, Claire. I made sure of it in one night. You can't undo it in 100 court dates. Then the elevator came, and he stepped in and smiled at me until the doors closed. And I stood alone in that concrete lobby, hating him with my whole ribcage, because the cruelest thing he'd said all year was the one true sentence in it. I didn't sleep much that night, and my exhibits had nothing to do with it. I finally had to decide what winning meant. The settlement conference convened in a borrowed conference room with bad coffee and a view of the courthouse flag. Prather came in gray-faced, flanked by a second lawyer they'd added for the occasion, which told me everything about how Feld's report had landed. Kettler laid her copy on the table like a place setting and gave me the War Council version one last time, low, near my ear. Say the word, and I walk this across the street to the district attorney. Forgery, fraud. He put a fabricated document in front of a judge, Claire. They take that personally. You'd own the house, the settlement, likely the business. By the time the dust cleared, you would own them. There it was, on a plate. Everything I'd wanted at 2 in the morning in my quarters. Every time I'd replayed Sandra's arm pointing at the door. I asked for 10 minutes and stood in the hallway with Maya, who had taken leave to sit in a plastic chair and be my spine. Two futures, side by side, like pages on my kitchen table. Future 1 * handcuffs. Headlines: Tolliver Realty a carcass. Sandra ruined at 63. And Ava at 8, at 12, at 17, learning that the reason there's no dad at the recital is that mom pressed charges. And the town retelling it forever, with me cast as the woman who burned the family down. 18 more months of motions, at least, with my daughter as the exhibit. Future 2 * had only one thing in it, but I couldn't stop looking at it. A record, permanent, public, in his own voice. My father had boxes of receipts and no one to read them into a record. I had both, and only one shot at choosing right. I walked back in. I have one offer, I said. It's not negotiable. I stayed standing because some things you deliver on your feet. Here are my terms, I said, and I looked at Prather, but I was talking to the man beside him, who had not met my eyes since the elevator. 1. Ryan appears at the final hearing in open court and reads a sworn admission into the record, that he fabricated the test, that he staged the 19th of April, that I never betrayed him. His words, his voice, his name on the transcript. Forever. 2. I receive sole legal and physical custody of Ava. Ryan gets supervised visitation, with a path to more if he shows up and stays honest. She's his daughter, the real lab said so, and she shouldn't have to pay for his character with her whole childhood. 3. The house is deeded to me alone, and the $48,200 comes back plus my legal fees. $19,400. 4. A notarized retraction goes to my commanding officer, correcting every word of the anonymous complaint. In exchange, I withdraw my request for a criminal referral. I won't ask the court to send this file across the street. The second lawyer started whispering. Prather stared at me the way you'd stare at a hand grenade rolling to a stop, with the pins still in. They had walked in braced for total war and been handed surrender terms that let their client keep his freedom. And they could not find the trap, because the trap wasn't for them. Kettler leaned in, and under the table her hand found my wrist. You're giving up the kill shot, she murmured. I know, I said. I'm trading it for the record. She looked at me for a long second, the way Hayes once looked at a manifest that finally balanced, and then she turned to Prather and started dictating deadlines. Ryan never said a word. He signed the term sheet like a man signing a listing on a house he'd grown up in. The final hearing fell on a hot Thursday in August, and the Tolliver family came to court the way they'd come to my living room, in force, in their church clothes, 30 strong. I recognized every face from the 19th of April. Jean, the cousins, the neighbors from 2 doors down. Sandra, front row behind her son, chin up, purse on her knees. The room even had the same silence, scraped clean, waiting. There was one difference in the seating chart. Bate walked past her mother's row, past 30 years of assigned seats, and sat down directly behind me. Her affidavit had been filed 2 weeks earlier. The kitchen, the turkey, the declaration that didn't sound like Sandra. And now she sat at my back where a witness belongs, hands folded, shaking slightly. Magnificent. The judge handled the divorce terms first, dry as inventory. Custody as agreed, deed as agreed, restitution of $48,200 as agreed, fees as agreed. Then she said, I understand there's a statement, and Ryan stood up. I watched a man who had never once in 9 years read from a script he didn't love unfold a single sheet of paper with both hands to keep it from moving. He read it flat, fast, like a hostage. But he read every word. He had purchased a novelty certificate online on March 30th. He had entered the false result himself. He had arranged the gathering of April 19th for the purpose of confronting me publicly. The complaint to my command repeated claims he knew to be false. And then the sentence I built 4 months around, his voice cracking open in the middle of it. Claire Tolliver never betrayed me. I fabricated the test, all of it. Somewhere behind me, Jean's wife made a sound like a hymnal dropping. Sandra stood up in the middle of it, the middle of the sentence, actually gathered her purse, and walked out of the courtroom with her heels striking the floor like a clock being wound too tight. She did not look at me. The doors swung shut. Her son kept reading to the room she'd left. The judge accepted the admission into the record, granted the sanctions motion, and said the words I'd traded my kill shot for. The court notes the petitioner's request, in the interest of the minor child, that no criminal referral be pursued. The court reserves its own discretion on that question. Reserves, meaning Ryan would spend a few years checking his mail carefully, which struck me as a fair tax on a man who'd once mailed my career a bomb. Outside on the courthouse steps, the town got to work metabolizing it all. Most people were kind. A reporter from the county paper asked for a comment and I declined politely twice. And then Mrs. Albright from the church choir, a sweet woman truly, she brought a casserole when Ava was born, took both my hands in hers and said, "I'm so glad it worked out, dear. Still, where there's smoke, you know." And she patted my knuckles and walked off to lunch. There it was, the residue, the thing Ryan had promised me in the elevator lobby. The stain that 30 witnesses and a notarized retraction and a court transcript cannot fully bleach because some people prefer the smell of smoke to the boredom of facts. I stood on those steps and let it hurt. And then I let it go. One breath in, one out. Cheaper than a criminal trial, I told myself, and mostly meant it. That same afternoon, the Army finished its own paperwork. Inquiry closed, unsubstantiated, flag lifted, retraction filed, and General Hayes called me personally, which generals do not do, to congratulate you on your divorce. "Your packet's moving again, Captain," he said. "Your name's in a good spot on the command list. I need your answer on something inside 72 hours. The second bill had arrived. What Hayes had for me was the future I'd been running toward since I was 18, battalion command track, the schools that feed it, the assignments that prove it, 2 years of moves and rotations, the on-ramp to lieutenant colonel and beyond. 12 years of my life pointed at that offer like a compass needle. I asked for the 72 hours, and I spent them the honest way. Lists on the kitchen table. Ava asleep down the hall. The tomato magnet holding a photo now instead of an appointment card. Then I drove to division headquarters and told a 2-star general, no. I asked for the instructor billet instead. The logistics captain's course at Fort Merrick. 3 years of stability, home by 6, one address for Ava, an off-ramp from the fast track that most officers never take on purpose. Hayes heard me out with his hands flat on the desk, the way he'd heard me the first time. "You'd have gotten it," he said. "I know," I said. "That's what makes it a choice." He stood and walked to the window, and for once the man dispensed something adjacent to sympathy. 26 years in, Captain. I'll tell you the only ledger that matters. It's not the rank. It's the number of people who'd raise their right hand and swear for you under oath, unpaid, on a Thursday. Yours is full. I've seen full ones turn out to matter more than stars. That night, I finally understood the difference between my father and me, and it isn't pride and it isn't paper. He kept his receipts in boxes no one ever opened. One man against a town, alone on purpose. I'd let people read mine. A sergeant, a lawyer, a general, a sister-in-law with shaking hands. Proof isn't what saves you. Witnessed proof is. So I wrote it all down for the one witness who matters most. A letter to Ava, sealed, marked for her 18th birthday, with the transcript folded inside. Truth in a drawer, not on a wall. The deed transfer recorded on a Tuesday in September, and Kettler mailed me the keys in a padded envelope with a sticky note that said, "Go home." I drove the 70 miles one more time, alone on purpose for the last time, and stood in the doorway where the whole war had started. The living room was empty. Ryan had tea. Aiken the furniture. Fine, let the man have chairs. And without it, the room where 30 relatives once stood shoulder to shoulder turned out to be small, ordinary, just a room with good afternoon light, and a scuff on the floor where a coffee table used to catch a slammed folder. I walked through and opened everything. Both windows in the living room, the kitchen window over the sink, the back door, the front door, wide, until the September air walked through the house like it was thinking about buying. I stood in that cross breeze and heard it one more time, the way you test a bruise. "Get out of my house," she'd screamed, with her whole arm pointing at where I'm standing now. Her asterisk house. It was never her house. It was never even really his. It was the house my deployments paid for. The one my name had been on since the day I signed. And now the only name. The next weekend, Ava's crib went into the sunny bedroom, and Maya carried boxes and ate half the pizza, and my daughter slept her first night in a home nobody could stage a tribunal in, because her mother owns the door. And her mother decides who walks through it, and her mother leaves it open. On purpose. The months since have been almost suspiciously quiet. The restitution cleared in 2 payments on schedule. 48,200 back where it started plus the fees. Tolliver Realty is still standing, smaller, run these days mostly by a cousin. Towns like Marwood don't burn their old names. They just stop repeating them as often. And honestly, that's the right size justice for this story. Ryan comes to his supervised Saturdays at the family center. Some weeks he's good with Ava, the duck song, the giraffe. And some weeks he cancels with a realtor's apology. And I write both kinds of Saturday down in a notebook, because I'm still my father's daughter, just the revised edition. Sandra sent a card on Ava's second birthday. Pink glitter. A bear holding balloons. She signed it with one letter, S**, no message, and I understood it completely. It's as far as her religion allows her to travel, and the door she's standing behind is one she built herself. I wrote back, thank you, she loved the bear. Some elections you lose. Ruth taught me, you can live anyway. Bait comes by most Sundays with banana bread and 0 apologies left to make. She made hers under oath, which is more than most people ever do. And in October, we had the party we never got in April. Ava turned 2 in the backyard of the Marwood house. Maya on cake duty. Kettler in weekend clothes nobody knew she owned. Half the block invited. General Hayes stopping by for exactly 20 minutes in a golf shirt to inspect the burgers and pronounce my logistics sound. 30-some people, laughing, in and out of my living room. And the front door propped wide open the entire afternoon with the same tomato magnet, if you want to know, holding the guest list to the refrigerator. Last April, a door opened behind me and saved my name because one friend walked through it. Now I keep it open on purpose, and I watch who walks in. And every single one of them would raise a right hand for me on a Thursday. That's the fortune I took out of the worst year of my life. The house came with it. If this year taught me one thing worth engraving, it's this: a lie needs a full room to stay alive. But the truth only needs one witness and a place where things get written down. So build your life where things get written down. And never be too proud to hand somebody the pen. That's my story, a text about a surprise, a folder slammed on a table, a sealed swab, and a door that opened at exactly the right time. If someone is writing their version of events over your life right now, start keeping your own record today, and find your one witness. Share your story in the comments. I do read them. And subscribe to Calm Drama Stories because next week, another door opens.